welcome to episode 312 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly podcast of many topics. And I'm Mike Sollosi, and we have a somewhat more retro than usual episode for you today, because this game is from 2007-2008 range, but it is about a game from 1988 or 89. This is East Origin. We're going to talk a lot about East Origin, East 1, and East 2 on this episode. And who am I joined by? The alternate story path, Audra Bowl.
Hello, nice to be here.
So, Audra, we did talk about this a little bit off air before we started to record, but I'm going to ask you again. Tell me the East games you've played and your impression of the series before getting into East Origin.
My East Origin playthrough is actually my first East game. I had done a playthrough when it first released. After that, it was East 3, Oath and Falgana, I believe is, and then East 4, Memories of Salsida, and East 9.
Right on, and that's an interesting path through the series. And I'm not criticizing you, but one thing about the East games is that before 2000, they were incredibly weird to track, because Falcom licensed different versions of East 3 and 4 to different companies. There are two East 4. Yeah, there are two East 4s, neither by Falcom, and there was and their version of East 3 was called, I think, Wanderers from East, and it was a 2D side scroller. Real weird times. But around 99-2000, they remade East 1 and 2 for a bunch of platforms. You could probably play that. You can probably play East 1 on a toaster if it has a monitor on it.
Refrigerator.
Exactly. But then every East game made after the slew of remakes, basically from East 6 onwards, Oath and Falgana is a remake of East 3, and Memories of Salsida is a remake of East 4 that incorporates stuff from both of the old East 4s. It's again it's a weird time. From then on, they have sort of tried to make East a unified storyline that is very referential to one another, and just so that there's series consistency and an official series canon, and not the mess that was the entire 1990s. So why am I going into this over explanation? East Origin is so full of East references that we see that both to the past and that ones that get carried on to the future. And we're going to mention a lot of them in these episodes, because I am just here to celebrate East and to talk about it with you, Audra. And it's sort of fitting that this episode has a male and female co-host, because East Origin has male and female main characters who each bring a different side to the story of East Origin. There's Yunica Tovah, who is sort of a tomboy apprentice knight who, despite her girlish figure, wields giant axes and swords. And then there's Hugo Fact, who is a mage that can fire beams out of his wand like he's a ship in Gradius or Galaga or something, with a handful of other spells. And Audra, what was your playthrough like some years ago, and how did you approach it this time?
Well, I was just beginning with East then, so I wasn't quite sure what to make of it at first. And I don't think I even finished my playthrough the first time I played it. So this is my first full going through the tower. And
all right.
Yep.
And you used Yunica, right?
Yes. I used Yunica both times just because I like her story, the knight that can't use magic.
Yeah, and especially since she's from one of the 6 big families. I'll get into that in a little bit. I used Yunica when I played the game originally, and I'm using Hugo now, but I haven't finished my Hugo playthrough. I'm around the halfway point, but we will talk about endings and end game in the next episode. But the families, go back to 1988 or whatever. In East 1, the main character is Adol Kristen. He's investigating a town. I think it's called Minea or Mintia or something. And he's looking for a lost land called East that was evidently there hundreds of years earlier. And he does so by collecting 6 tomes that were each written by a sage from hundreds of years ago, and then climbing a tower, which is like the entire second half of the game practically. And after collecting the sixth book from the boss of the tower, he is transported to a floating continent, and that is East 2. East 2 begins with Adol waking up on this floating continent, realizing that it is East, and East was sort of was ripped from the earth and has been floating in the sky for 1,000 years. And while the sages who wrote those books and the guardian goddesses Fina and Rhea had been waiting in East in the on the surface, like basically as protectors of East, and we learned this at the beginning of East Origin. um there's a conflict with some demons. The people of East have raise their continent to the sky to escape the demons. The demons build a giant tower to reach East, but then a bunch of knights and sorcerers from East along are trying to hold off the demons. But the disappearance of Fina and Rhea, their goddesses that are worshipped on East, disappear, and Hugo and Yunica are part of the search party looking for Fina and Rhea, and the player can choose Yunica or Hugo as their player character for East Origin. Zooming back to East 1 and 2, like Fina and Rhea are regular townspeople in East 1, and near the end of the game, it's revealed that they're goddesses that have been hiding the secret of East for 1,000 years. And there is even a slightly romantic undertone between Fina and Adol in particular.
Yes.
Yeah,
I remember that from the anime.
Right, yeah. Adol seems to have between 1 and 4 women develop a crush on him over the course of every East game.
He has a way with women.
He really does. He's the strong, silent type. But of course he only has eyes for adventure and maybe Doki. But so East Origin is a prequel to East 1 and 2 that goes into the background of of what happened to East and who Fina and Rhea are. But also those 6 books that Edel has to collect in East 1 are named after the sages that founded the town, and they're all most of them are characters in East Origin. One of them is the Book of Tovah, which is Yunica. One of them is the Book of Fact, which is Hugo. One of them is the Book of Gemma, which is the name of the guy that upgrades your weapon at the base of the tower. You know who I mean? The guy that you give
the Claria ore to?
Yeah, the guy that you give the silver to. That's right. And Claria shows up in a bunch of East games. Like you get 3 special Claria swords in East 6. In East 1, the silver weapons are the second strongest weapons in the game, but they're the only ones that can break through the armor of the final boss. And I should mention who's the final boss of East 1? Dark Fact, a descendant of Hugo Fact. And Hugo's moveset, from the lasers to the explosions to the Ring of Fire, are based on the final boss of East 1. Unica's moveset is similar to Adol's in East 6 and East Othan Felgana, which I'm sure you noticed a little bit. And Hugo's moveset is based on the final boss of East 1. And that final boss is a nightmare, and it is maybe the most annoying thing about East 1, which is a short, like 3 or 4 hour RPG. But like everything from how these characters play to their names to the story setup to the tower, because again the tower is the final dungeon in East 1, and the tower is the entirety of the game in East Origin. It's a huge reference, and it's not better or worse to play East 1 and 2 or East Origin first. If you play Origin then 1 and 2, you'll notice a ton of things in 1 and 2, and it'll be vice versa if you play them in the reverse order. But I think that East Origin, which again is I think the third big game they did after the East 1 and 2 sort of reboots, remakes, is like references and connections are so huge in the Falcom of now that again, because like every Legend of Heroes Trails game is building on the previous one, to which point I'm worried that it's become a slightly inaccessible series for some. But that's a separate conversation. I
can kind of see that.
Right, yeah, it's like, oh great, I want to play Trails. Where do I start? Oh, there's 14 of them. Maybe I'll play something else. Like I'm worried too many people will have that attitude when those games are mostly really, really good. But anyway, back to East. So Audra, you've seen the anime for East 1, but you haven't played them. Was there anything that during your playthrough in East Origin, because you finished Unica's route, right?
Yes.
Great. Was there anything you specifically noticed in East Origin that shows up in one of the other East games you've played?
Definitely the whole mentioning of especially Fact. That was, well, because I knew about him from the anime.
Yeah, sure. No, of course you had. He's the final boss of East One. I imagine he would be in the anime.
The centipede boss fight was
Was that also
pretty.
was that also in the anime or something else?
Oh no, that's E's 9. E's 9.
Right. Right. Avoiding some spoilers for East Nine, Adol has to fight some enemies from his memory or from his past in that game, and one of them is the big centipede. I don't know the boss names in this game because they're all nonsense words like one of them.
Mantid.
Okay, that one's
Um,
easy. That one's easier than usual. One of them is like Valagundar or something that I thought was sounded like Val Kilmer. Um, I'm not going to try to remember all of them. But the gist of East Origin is you're in the tower from East One. These are characters and ancestors from of characters from East One, and you're going up that tower. And the six large demon bosses that are behind medallion doors are each a boss in East One or Two, and a lot of the other bosses have other East connections. I'm trying to think, and it's not exactly the same for Yunica and Hugo. I think uh, with with Yunica, you fight what's her name? You fight Epona like after the first boss. Well, in Hugo, Epona he fights Epona, then the first boss right after her. And I believe Yunica fights Kishgal twice, and Hugo fights Kishgal once, and Toal twice. Like just they all fight the six demons, but their human enemies are encountered in different orders or different numbers of times. And we mentioned Kishgal and Epona. They're two people of the Darkling race, which are from outside East. They live in the very harsh wilderness outside the haven that was created by the goddesses. And the Darklings or the Tribe of Darkness show up as villains or recurring enemies in all of the East games after the reboot. And I wanted to ask you, did you notice something specific about Kishgal's moveset?
it seemed very familiar, but I wasn't quite sure.
Okay. I'm being unfair here. I'm putting you on the spot. One of the main characters in East Memories of Celceta is a woman who uses a
I've
naginata or a halberd. Yeah, Frida fights with a halberd and has a lot of ice attacks, just like Kishgal. And Frida's village is a hidden village of descendants of the tribe of darkness. And there's another connection to Memories of Celceta and the Tribe of Darkness. We don't need to go into, but like even though Memories of Celceta was made a couple years after Origin, like they're still trying to carry through these references. Celceta is like having Frida in Celceta, and she's probably my favorite or second favorite character in Celceta. She's awesome,
and
but
she was somehow connected to, is his name Geist from E7
um
or E6 or something.
he's from E6 and 7. Uh,
Ah,
uh she I think I think she trained him because Geis also fights with a halberd, and he's like Adol's rival, trying to solve the secret of the island, just like Adol is in E6, but then joins the party in E7. And I think some of his moves are similar because like he trained with Frida or something, but Frida is a descendant of the Tribe of Darkness and has moves similar to Kishgal, while I think I think Geist also has a connection to the Tribe of Darkness because his brother is the main villain of E6 and is trying to do some dastardly Tribe of Darkness thing. I don't remember E6 that well. It's been a long time since I
it's
played it.
just, it's interesting how they were trying to connect them so much.
Yeah, like that's just how Falcom works. They love having games build upon their previous games and connect with other games because they know that it's like being a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Hmm.
They eat up every single reference and connection that make people feel like they're seeing a larger whole, the whole spelled WHOLE, that enriches the overall experience. And I think that East has done a really good job with that over the years. I don't think there's been a bad one since E6, even though I thought I like some more than others, of course. But let's go into my East history a little bit because I'm being a little unfair asking Audra to spill her guts on how she played all of them. I disliked East for about 10 years. I like when I was trying to play all of the big Super Nintendo RPGs in the early 2000s, I came across Wanderers from East, and I knew Ys only a little bit by reputation. It's like, oh, this is an older series. They have a bunch of great soundtracks. There's remixes of them on OC Remix, all that jazz. So I tried Wanderers from Ys and thought it was bad. It's like, this is like a worse, I don't know, like the action sequences in ActRaiser, or a worse Ghosts and Goblins or something. I did not like Wanderers from Ys, but then many years later, I one of my friends in university is a big Ys fan, and I tell him that Ys sucks, and he asks me to reconsider, and I listen to a bunch of podcasts in the early 2010s, including RPG fans, Random Encounter and Rhythm Encounter, and people like Derek Heemsberg, and former host of Random Encounter, like he is espousing how good Ys has been over the past several years. And again, this is the early 2010s. So I decided, I forget the year. I have to look it up. It was either 2014 or 2014. 2014 or 2015, because I know I had just joined RPG Fan as staff by then. I decided to just get a couple Ys games in a Steam sale and play them. I played Oath and Felghana first, then one and two, then Origin, then Seven, and now this is where my memory gets shaky. Then I played the Ys versus Kiseki Trails fighting game, which is a game I love and will defend forever. It's a PSP game. It was
Oh, I actually have that. I haven't played it, but my
yeah.
sister got me an import copy of it.
Yeah, like getting certain Japanese imports is really quite inexpensive. Like a lot of the time, a Japanese copy of an RPG will be cheaper than the North American version, especially if it's made for an older system. Then I played 6, and then from Celceta onwards, I played each of them basically the year they came out. I've played all of the ones that have come out in English, but it started out with me playing like 6 Ys games in 5 months in 6 or 7 years ago when I binged a bunch of them at once, and I haven't played Ys Origins since that binge. So I'm playing through Hugo's route now, but it's my first time playing Ys Origin in, let's say, 6 years, and Hugo and Yunica play very differently. Like Audra, you've played Felghana and Origin. Unica's really similar to a doll, except like she has a smash instead of a dash for her Topaz move, and I think her wind move with the fan is a little smoother. Like, what differences have you noticed?
Basically, just more that she has the axe animations more than. I mean, I haven't. She's maybe not as fast as Adel.
Yeah, I think the dash in this game is just only a medium speed. It's not the most blazing fast dash you've ever tried, but you can upgrade the dash through the goddess
With the
statues.
divine blessing.
Yeah, you got to collect a lot of points for those divine blessings.
Mm-hmm.
Upgrade everything from your armor to your spells to your dash to the drop rates. I'm saving up for a drop rate. I think I'm pretty close to getting extra SP drops.
Ooh, that would be
But
good.
that reminds me, this is true also in Felghana, but maybe even more so here. This game sometimes feels like an arcade game to me, because it's one level, one contiguous level. It's not really an open world RPG or anything. There's no town or anything, but you can go back for weapon upgrades and skill upgrades. But enemies are always dropping stuff. And sometimes they drop SP currency for upgrades. Sometimes they drop health. Sometimes they'll drop temporary attack or defense bonuses that can stack. You have a sort of super mode button that refills quite quickly, so you can go into super mode practically every third or fourth enemy encounter. It's fast paced. You're always hacking and slashing enemies and picking up items. It feels like I'm playing a shmup sometimes, like Gradius.
Yeah, it actually does have that feel now that you said that. I quite like the have you gotten the super move yet? One of the rules will actually upgrade your super move to like a really powerful one if you're playing Unica.
Oh, oh shoot, I vaguely remember that. I haven't gotten it yet in this playthrough. I've only fought, I think, four, maybe 5 story bosses.
Yeah, I'd spam that sucker a lot.
All right, yeah, but again, you're like always building a meter. Your magic meter recovers quickly, so you can use your 3 spells, which again are a wind, thunder, and fire one for each character. For Unica, she gets a spin, a smash, and a fireball. And Hugo, I haven't gotten his fire spell yet, but Hugo gets a shield that lets him levitate a little bit, a bomb that he can plant and detonate at will, and I think his last one is like a spinning circle of fire around him, because that's something that that Dark Fact did in old
Ah,
East One. And but
so,
in Dark Fact didn't exactly. He definitely had his and but again, Hugo has these two floating eyes of fact, which are like little drones that float around him. Kind of kind of like a Reedy in the game we played last month for the podcast.
oh yeah.
And every time he fires a little ball of light from his wand, and his little drones fire in, so he gets like a triple spread. Again, kind of like you're playing a shmup. And in the super mode, he gets his drones double, and he shoots out 5 beams instead of 3. So, but also he doesn't lock on to enemies and always fires directly in front of him. So sometimes it's weird positioning around to properly fire enemies, and a lot of the time it's me just throwing on a shield or dropping a mine and getting right into the enemy's face, just circling them and firing beams. Because he can move and fire. He's not interrupted by, like, sort of, he's not driven by his combo the way Yunica is.
Mm-hmm.
But he can. But positioning for Hugo gets a little weird, and sometimes I play him a little too recklessly.
So is he kind of like Renegade from East 9 then?
A little bit, yeah. Like, imagine if Renegade was faster and
Yeah.
could and had and had a shield that would tank one hit for you. It's, Renegade does have a little bit of Hugo fact in them. Now that I think about that, that wasn't the connection I had made. But like, again, Hugo and Unica play completely differently, and there is a third character that Audra, you of course know this because you've already beaten the game recently. There's a third
Yes.
character that unlocks when you beat either of the first 2 routes, and I haven't played his route, but I understand that his goes to a deeper story place that is sort of the true ending of the game to a degree. But we'll talk about him in the next episode. We'll see if I can beat his route as well in the next
Yeah, I'm
week or
gonna try
so.
to beat his too. I thought he was interesting for the 2 seconds he showed up in my playthrough.
Yeah, he shows up more in Hugo's playthrough. I think I've already met up with him for far longer than 2 seconds, but
Because I know there's spoilers with him.
yeah, we'll get into those in the next
Uh,
episode. But again, there is a third playable character. It's a him, and we will both try to at least mess around with him before we record in another week. But again, like, fast paced action, a lot of connections to past East games, connections that carry on to future East games. Um, Falcom getting real weird and deep with their lore. But we haven't talked about the dungeon itself. Again, this is a tower that I believe goes up to 25 or 30 floors.
I think
And
it's 25, I believe
okay,
is the.
right. And for the most part, you'll go through 3 or 4 floors and then fight a boss. Then there'll be some story stuff, and then the next floor will be a completely different style of dungeon or even biome than the previous floor. Like the first floor is basically just floating blocks. The second floor has a lot of water and even some underwater and flooding segments where you have to manage your oxygen. And then the third one is, I think, mostly flames and fire. I know there's a sand one
There's
later.
the sand one that you have the quicksand and then the like slippery sand.
Right.
There's the mirror. There's like a hall of mirrors.
That Hall of Mirrors is from East One. East One, the last couple floors of the tower have a bunch of mirrors. It's like mirror puzzles and teleporter puzzles. And I'd have to double check for Origin, but my favorite East song of all time plays in that mirror area in the old East games. I think I'm going to talk about that on an episode of Rhythm Encounter later this year.
And there's something called like the demon corridor, which is or,
Oh yeah,
some kind of corridor with the poison.
yeah. There's poison and blood and monster
Mm-hmm.
stuff in it. Yeah, I remember that one. I think that's where Mantid is, right? Another thing besides this lore that East is known for, and the intense gameplay, are intense boss fights. Uh, I was doing okay this playthrough, and until I accidentally blew myself up against the centipede. I,
Oh
I,
no.
your Hugo is immune to his own mine explosions, but I basically dropped so many mine explosions in one place that I didn't notice the centipede throwing his own explosive orbs at me. So I've fortunately only died a couple times, but I know in these games it is commonplace to die many times against some boss fights. What did you think of the variety of the boss battles and the challenge level of them?
I thought the challenge was pretty good. I did have to retry a few of them. And I really like that they have a retry option that just opens up the second set. You don't have to go through getting to the boss again.
Yeah, but they also give you the option of going back to the title screen and to the last save point in case you think you need to grind some more or something.
I had to actually, one time I forgot to upgrade my weapons.
Oh well, yeah, that'll do it.
Yep, so I had to do backtrack.
If Yunica hasn't upgraded her axe in 5 hours, then maybe it's time to. Yeah, wait, but backtrack. You didn't use any fast travel.
Oh no, I did.
Oh,
That's what
okay,
I'm.
good. Phew. For a second, I thought you didn't know how to use fast travel, and then I was really worried.
No, I learned that one pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
I was confused a little bit because I think the last East game I played. The last East game I played was definitely 9, and 9 lets you fast travel everywhere. But even late games after Origin, like 7 and Sollosi, they let you teleport from save point to save point by going to a save point. But in this game, you have to go into your menu and use the crystal.
Yeah, they did a lot of. You had to use items specifically in this game. Like you'd have to go into the inventory screen and select it, and for a bunch of the items, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, you have to do that for the crystal that protects you from the force field early on, and for the item that lets you breathe underwater much better.
Mm-hmm.
There's basically a little bit of inventory clunkiness that maybe is a little bit reminiscent of playing an East game on the NES or PC Engine or whatever you played it on. But that is kind of how East a lot of old East works. It's not really a Metroidvania game, but it is a multi-dungeon zone where revisiting and judicious use of items is how you progress. But it's less like a true Metroidvania because I know Audra, you and I were on a Metroidvania episode of a podcast not long ago.
Yes, we were.
Yeah, so I know you know a little bit about that stuff at least. But East really isn't a Metroidvania. It's an action RPG that has weird event flagging and weird item use because there's a lot of you can't go here until you do this in ways that isn't very clearly communicated, especially in like East 1 and East 6.
Like the one thing that I had huge difficulty with in Origin was actually that hidden eye mask.
Oh yeah.
I never knew when I needed to use that. So
You,
it would
you
take me forever to actually figure out, oh, I need to look around for something to find out what I have to do next.
Yeah, it's there's not many times you have to do it. It's only I think 3 or 4
Mm-hmm.
times the whole game. But it's like you have to look, oh, there's a wall with a design on it, or this mirror has a different border around it than these other mirrors, like that
Or
kind of
here's an
thing.
invisible bridge.
Yeah, exactly. And when you put on the mask, you can't see enemies, so
Mm-hmm.
that's a fun twist. But uh, yeah, you get the mask like really early on, like 30 minutes into the game, and they have you using it in the last segment of the last dungeon segment of the game. So they don't let you forget it.
No, and you can't, unfortunately, you can't sell items in this one.
Yeah, no, you fill up every inventory slot if memory serves, or you can if you go around and find everything. But
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of what's rewarding about East is like there's a bunch of hidden stuff. There's a minor collectathon that can be really helpful later in the game. There's cool boss fights. The story is not very long. Did the game? I imagine the game took you 10 hours or less, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much 10 hours, maybe 11.
Yeah, and if you replay this game with the third character, you'll know the at least the skeleton of how to proceed, and you've seen these bosses before, so it'll probably go faster.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I wonder if he has new bosses, though.
I think he has some new bosses. I messed around with him briefly when I played this game 6 years ago, and I know that because he starts out sort of as a bad guy, he fights a couple people that are in your party.
Oh,
Like because
interesting.
it's not just Unica and Hugo in the dungeon. I
No,
know
it's a whole bunch of people.
yeah, I know you knew this, Audra. This is for the listener benefit, I guess. But it's a search party looking for Fina and Rhea who have gone missing. So there's about maybe 8 to 10 people that are hanging out that you interact with frequently. Some of which are probably or some definitely some probably ancestors of characters in East One. Like there's a shopkeeper or fortune teller in East One that looks exactly like oh shoot I think Sedana, or do you know who I mean, the woman with silver hair.
Oh, I thought it was Kaidina.
Kadena, that's it. Or yeah, like there's a woman in East One that looks a lot like her, so I'm wondering if that's if there's a connection there.
Like a
Um,
throwback.
yeah, but there's a bunch of characters in Ys Origin that are very minor that you don't really see in battle, but I know that the third character fights one or two of them in boss fights.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Because one of them is like his second boss in the game, is like where I stopped playing with him. Um, I forget that guy's name too. It's the male knight his name starts with an H. You know who I mean?
Galleon?
Yeah, Galleon. That's it.
Galleon?
That's right. That's right. I was okay. That's not an H at all, but that I believe that is who I'm referring to. I think Galleon is an early boss for the third character, if memory serves. I'd have to go back and play it for sure. But again, there's it's not just enemies and light puzzles in the dungeon. There's a bunch of items to collect. We went over those funny little roo animals
Mm-hmm.
that look like a combination of rabbits, kangaroos, and maybe squirrels.
Ah, the ruse. You definitely want to find them and help them out because they help you out a lot.
They'll give you Claria ore. They'll give you gems to upgrade your spells. Uh, I think you mentioned that one of them gives you a super move that I don't remember from playing this game a long time ago.
Yeah, it's like a new of the boost. When you
Oh,
have a full boost meter or burst meter, I can't remember exactly what it's called.
I think it is burst. Yeah, so an upgrade for the burst meter.
Mm-hmm.
There is a rue in East 9 that that plays a pretty large role and can
Yes, that
speak.
one talks.
Yeah, that one speaks can speak human tongue. I don't think any of the rues in other games do, because you see them occasionally in other East games, but they're always sort of in the background or part of a very minor collecting side quest like in East Origin. I think they're in East 6.
They're the Moogles without talking. Well, I guess I'd make them Moombas.
Yeah, no, they can be the Muggles or the slimes of this game, because they do speak, and most Muggles can only say Kupo or variants thereof. So yeah, calling them the Muggles of East I think is fair. Maybe the slimes of East, but East actually has their own slimes, so yeah, yeah, put that one back in the drawer. But Audra, you have finished Unica's route. Is there anything you're specifically looking forward to when you try out Hugo or the third character over the next week?
I want to know more about Epona. I actually quite liked her, but she isn't in Unica's route a ton.
She shows up more frequently in Hugo's route. I think they've already talked 3 separate times, and I'm at maybe at the halfway point.
Oh, cool.
So yeah,
And I want to learn more about Hugo in general because, yeah, he comes into Unica's route really late and then doesn't stick around for too often.
Hugo has a completely different tone from Unica. I know you don't necessarily. I'm not asking you to finish the game again, but at least play Hugo's route for 20 minutes just to get a feel for how haughty and how much of a jerk he is. And I know he hooks up with someone at the end of the game, because we know he has a descendant dark fact in East 1, but I just don't know if it's going to be the quiet shrine priestess or Epona, because I think I would put it 50-50 between those two ladies.
Oh, yeah, I could probably see either way from what I've gathered.
I forget her name though, the healer that's in the group. You know who I mean.
Miescha.
Oh yeah,
Something weird.
yeah, like Mush or
Mhm.
it's like Miusche or something. Right. God, I'm so bad.
What
at
are those
remembering
fantasy
names.
names that's hard to pronounce?
Yeah, fantasy names with I don't know, way too many consonants. Sometimes way too many vowels. But yeah, it's I've gotten worse at remembering Japanese names and fantasy names, even though I spend a lot of time podcasting about both of those things. I go a little crazy if I try to play 2 Yakuza games close together, because all the Japanese names just overwhelm me, and I stop understanding the story. That not recommended. But we're not here to talk about Yakuza or fantasy names. We're still in East Origin, but I think we've come close to running out of topics to talk about. I want to get into the end game and how the third character behaves, and maybe some more discussion about boss fights. But that is something we probably should save for the second episode. But this game, uh, a playthrough was maybe around 10 hours, but because there are 3 story paths that have different characters and some different boss fights, even though I think the layout of the dungeon is the same for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things people said was a little
Yeah.
tricky, like made it feel like it dragged on, perhaps.
Yeah, it's I mean, the dungeon is good, and the platforming is way better than the platforming in Oath and Felghana, which is not a high bar to cross, but like the platforming and the action is a little smoother, and the dungeon's cool. The problem is if it is a big ask to run through a 10-hour game 3 times when the dungeon is exactly the same.
I guess at least they all have different abilities, though, so
Oh yeah, no, the
that
characters
helps.
feel completely different to play.
Hmm.
Again, from my brief memory of experimenting with the third character, and half of the game is Hugo, and the full game is Yunica in my resume, I suppose. But resumes don't matter here. I guess answering the question that I presented to you a few minutes ago, Audra, the thing I want to see is just Hugo's ending, because I know who the characters at the end of this game are, and I want to see if Hugo, again, who's coming from a position of sort of more arrogance than Unica. I want to see his interactions with Zava and Dallas and the rest of the final enemies in this game, and also I want to see if I can seriously uh, go through the third character's route. So I have a lot of video games ahead of me to play. I when I'm not playing Geese Origin, I am thinking of the next Yakuza game, or Tales of Arise, which I'm partway through, or Shin Megami
Oh,
Tensei.
lucky! I have it, but I haven't been able to play it yet.
Oh,
So,
it's real good. It's real good. I'm a longtime Tales fan. Talked about it on podcasts before. And Tales of Arise feels different from other Tales games, but not in a bad way. In a oh, this is interesting, and I want to play some more of it way. Um, and I have Shin Megami Tensei 5 on deck, and I have my ongoing obsession of Monster Hunter hitting me hard again for reasons that are not easy to explain. I don't like I guess we saw those trailers in September, and that got me that got me the itch again. But we're not talking about Monster Hunter or Yakuza or Tales or Shin Megami Tensei this week, although we have talked about those on this podcast many times before. We're talking East, and we are saving the rest of our East origin discussion for the next episode. But speaking of the next episodes, let's talk about the next couple episodes of Retro Encounter, shall we? We have again part 2 of East Origin next week. Then we're doing episodes on Imposter Factory, Final Fantasy V, and a new Final Fantasy 14 episode coming in December. I think that Final Fantasy 14 episode is going to be Retro Encounter's last FF14 episode for a long time. We did 4 FF14 episodes earlier this year, and I think this last one is going to be sort of our cap off, our finisher to the Final Fantasy 14 Retro Encounter saga. But that's coming in December. Again, along with 1 episode on the Imposter Factory and 2 episodes on Final Fantasy V. RPG Fan also has 3 other fine podcasts that we support. There's Random Encounter, which is about current events and randomness and random topics. Audra, you and I were on Random earlier this week talking about Castlevania.
yes, that was fun.
That was fun. Castlevania, another one of my old obsessive series whose obsession comes and goes for me, because that's kind of that's how my brain works, I guess. And also Rhythm Encounter, which is about RPG music. I'm recording an episode of Rhythm Encounter pretty soon, so I think I'm on a December episode in which East is going to feature a little bit. So
Oh, well, definitely, it has great music.
oh yeah, I am. There is one East song that I am bringing to Rhythm Encounter. I'm not sure exactly when it airs, but it'll be sometime in the next month or month and a half. And also there is Phoenix Edge RPG Fans Partner Podcast, which is a a live recorded podcast hosted by Hat and Eric, usually recorded on YouTube, about a wide variety of topics. Sometimes they're weekly, sometimes they're more like bi-weekly, but they are always interesting, along with Random Encounter and Rhythm Encounter and Retro Encounter, which you're listening to right now. You can review Retro Encounter and those other 3 podcasts on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify or however you're listening to us. There's also a lot of other ways to interact with RPG Fan. You can email us, retro@rpgfan.com. I check that email every day. There's also, you can commenting on RPG Fan's message boards and main page. Visit the RPG Fan Facebook page, the Instagram page, the Twitter account, the Discord server, the YouTube channel, the Twitch channel, something streaming every day on Twitch, and reviews, features, and podcasts going up every day on that main website. Please give us feedback however you can give us feedback, whether it's on those podcast applications or directly on one of our PG fans' main websites. But Audra, if a listener were to want to get in contact with you, how should they do so?
Probably best way is through email, audrab@rpgfan.com.
And listeners, you probably shouldn't email me. I do have an RPG fan email, but it is full of spam from being on E3 lists and having my email published for a little bit too long. The best way to reach me is Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times, and on the RPG fan Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. But let's see, it's not really a monsoon, but there is some kind of weird perpetual storm going on in East, like outside of that tower. Like the goddesses protected East, but the outside is a complete mess. But in later East games, 1,000 years later, we know that it's basically a temperate, like fake Europe, right?
Yes, I believe so.
I wonder how they end up resolving that. Maybe it's something from East Origin that I don't remember. But maybe it'll come back to me. Maybe I'll have to re-experience it again. Listeners, thank you for experiencing this podcast with us. Thank you. Good night and good luck.